and I'll give you the key. It's easy. Just keep on hopping, keep on rocking, and don't start stopping. Everything you need just to walk the scene. And if you wanna make it better, you give it to me, I'll grace it. I believe for you, you wouldn't believe what I see in you. So don't stop, don't let the dream drop hop. Hold up and make it lovely, make it real, and make it yours. Don't stop.
All right, Brock, I'm so excited to have you on the show. You and I got talking, and we have a lot of things alike. We also coach people, and we have noticed a lot of similarities in the reasonings behind people getting into athletic ordeals or setting some goals that may not be conducive to what they're actually trying to get at. So we
Right.
talked a lot about that. It was really awesome, and I'm really excited to have you on the show.
I'm excited to be here. This has been on my calendar for a number of weeks now. I keep watching it getting closer and closer. So I'm finally here.
I know, I was excited. I've had some really great conversations lately, and they've been really pertinent to things that are also going on in my life at a personal level. So it's been kind of cool to chat with all these people and catch up with the people I've had on the podcast, such as yourself, because we all have these little things that we have in common and we can relate with.
And then have the things that are completely different that we can blow each other's minds with.
That's even better. Well, first of all, before we get too far into the weeds here, I want you to let everybody know who you are, what you do, what got you going in the direction that you're currently going.
All right. Well, my name's Brock Armstrong. I'm Canadian, if you can't guess by my outrageous accent. I always point that out. I've got the most boring of Canadian accents. I'm from like the middle western part of Canada, so we are the most boring accented people in the world. So I'm one of those people that grew up, well, I grew up in the 70s. So I was born in 1971. So I consider our generation, the firmly in Generation X, to be among the luckiest in some ways, mostly in that we were just sort of sent outside at the beginning of the day, especially when school was out or whatever, to go and fend for ourselves. And it was one of those things of, I don't want to see you again back here until dinner time. And we were given this great autonomy to just go out and investigate the world and investigate our capabilities and be on our bikes, be on our feet, be exploring and stuff. So growing up like that, I think was a real, well, at least for me, it was a real kickstart to the way I've lived the rest of my life. I've always been active. I've always been interested in sport and athletics and stuff, not in formal senses necessarily, but like just kicking the ball around or racing bikes against your friends and stuff. And it was such a great way to grow up, embracing how the body can function and how the body can move, and just in really enjoying that. And that has really played itself out throughout my life, to the point where I was a professional ballet dancer for a number of years in the 80s and 90s. And then after that career ended, I kept exercising, became an endurance athlete, did a lot of triathlons, a lot of marathons, eventually some Ironman triathlons, which is really extreme if you're not familiar with them. It's a little too long. And eventually decided to become a coach myself because I really enjoyed it and found a lot of people sort of asking me questions about my own training programs and stuff. So I decided to get some certifications, started working with people like Ben Greenfield and Brad Kearns and Mark Sisson and Katie Bowman and all these wonderful people that I could just pick their brains. And then I kind of hit a wall of like exactly what you were saying in the intro, that people were coming to me assuming or saying that they wanted to do this race or they wanted to train for another event or something like that. But what was really behind that had nothing to do with athleticism, had nothing to do with really, they weren't worried about improving their times, or maybe they were, but not really significantly. It was rooted in a much more meaningful and deeply emotional place. And I had, in the meantime, been really interested in cognitive behavior therapy as a patient, first of all, and then actually became certified as a cognitive behavior therapy practitioner. And one day I just sort of had this epiphany that giving people more training plans and giving people more eating plans wasn't where I wanted to be. Like, sure, that was really, really helpful, and people thought they needed that, and some people found some really good they managed to turn some of their issues around doing that. But I really decided and discovered that most people don't need to know what to do. Like, as far as like eating healthy, we know what we should be doing to a certain extent. There are some extreme cases, but for the most part, we know we should be avoiding processed food and junk food and stuff, and eating more vegetables and meats and stuff like that. And we know we should be on our feet more often, and we should be lifting things and exercising and stuff like that. But the bigger problem was how to get yourself to do that outside of just signing up for these races and paying me $250 a month to coach you, which is motivating to a certain extent. But I had a lot of people who were paying me $250 a month, and they weren't doing any of the workouts I was giving them, because they just thought magically by doing this, they were going to feel motivated or eventually come around and start losing the weight or whatever their goal was. So I've really done, I guess it's not a 180, but I've definitely done a paradigm shift in the way that I coach now, to much more being about the how rather than the what.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is huge, because how many people, I'm just going to use myself as an example. In the past, if I wanted to lose weight, I, for some reason, thought I needed to run and cook my meals at home. Like, that was, and the very first thing that I would try to do every time I would start that health or fitness journey over again, right, would be, I would start running every single time. And actually at one point, and I hate running. Like, there's nothing good about running. Sorry, no offense to you, but
No.
I am not the runner type. I am not a successful runner. I used to actually, and this goes deep down into high school. When I was in high school, I used to do track and field just so that I would be in shape and look good. It had nothing to do with doing track and field as an athletic endeavor. It was literally so that I could maintain my body composition. So I feel like a lot of people's goals are rooted in what their overall appearance is rather than something outwardly different.
Yeah, their appearance, their self-esteem. There are so many layers to that onion that have, like you said, have nothing to do with actually enjoying the athleticism or even wanting to get better at it. It's just the story you told, like, people always find out that I'm an athletic coach or something, and they're like, oh yeah, I should really get in shape, but I hate running, or I can't run anymore because my knees hurt. And it's like, so that's the only thing you can think of when it comes to like some sort of cardiovascular exercise? Is the only thing you can think of is running, is either running or hit the couch?
The sad part is, and this might be totally profiling people, but I see people all the time out running, and they're usually someone that looks like they may be attempting to change their body composition, and they look miserable.
Yeah.
And I just want to pull over and be like, hey girl, you don't have to run right now. We can go do something else. Like, literally, that's what goes through my mind when I see it going down.
It's the people with the knee braces on both knees and an ankle brace on one ankle, and then they have a miserable look on their face. And it's like, oh, come on. There's so many other things you could be doing, including walking. Like, and I really think that, and this is a little bit of a tangent, but if we actually removed the idea that exercise burned calories, if we had never made that connection whatsoever, if it was not even on the table, would people still do the activities that they're doing? And I'd say no, like, they wouldn't be going out for that run. But somebody told them along the way that if they ran for 45 minutes, they could burn off that donut or the frappuccino or whatever they wanted to burn off. And so we engage in these activities that we don't enjoy. They're not good for us. They're not helping us in any way, just because we're burning calories. And I would love to reverse time somehow to the day when we started equating exercise with burning calories, and just, like, I don't know, put a stop to it somehow. I'm sure that would involve some sort of murder of some sort, but I don't want to do that. But you know what I mean.
Absolutely. Well, this is really good. I love this, and I'm totally going to pull this out of this episode for sure, because that's the thing, right? People get so rooted in the fact that they have to exercise it's very hard for them to stick to a program. Like you said, you have people that pay you and they don't even do it because they don't love it. So finding what you love is really an important part of things.
And realizing that exercise isn't something that has to be, you don't have to change your clothes, you don't have to go to a secondary location, you don't have to set time aside for it. We can find exercise. Like there's really only three things that go into making movement into exercise. And that's one, that it challenges your muscles in some way, a little or a lot, raises your heart rate, again, a little or a lot, and teases or massages your balance and your mobility and your agility in some way, again, a little or a lot. So we, like, when you think about it in that way, it's like, well, doing laundry, if I carry all of my laundry up the stairs in a basket out in front of me, well, that's challenging my muscles a little or a lot. I bet my heart rate's gonna go up a little bit, and yeah, my balance is going to be tested because I'm not going to be able to see the stairs and stuff. So boom, you've got exercise out of an everyday activity. And we've completely forgotten about that. We've gone from not having gyms, like prior to 1960 something, I think, was when the first public gyms, like people actually started paying to go to gyms, like everyday kind of people started going to gyms instead of just like muscle men, basically, or boxers that went to those, like they had boxing rings and a few dumbbells and stuff scattered around. And then it wasn't really until the 80s that we saw the big gym chains actually opening up across North America and the UK anyway. So it's a really short amount of time that we've gone from movement, everyday movement, being the way that we stayed agile and strong and capable and all of those kind of things. Notice I didn't say skinny or thin in there. That was because we didn't have carbohydrate at every single turn every time. I was at that freaking hardware store the other day and they had food at the hardware store. Why is there food at the hardware store? I'm there to buy a part for my toilet. Why do I have to be inundated with food while I'm there? But anyway, so we've gone from this time period of, like, there was a relatively short amount of time from the time that we could and did get our daily movement, our nutritious movement, as my friend Katie Bowman calls it, from our everyday life, to thinking that the only way we can exercise is by changing into spandex, putting on a video on our iPad, or going to a secondary location, setting time aside, having to shower afterwards, and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we're an interesting lot, us humans. We've really taken it and turned movement into a way to burn calories, and has to be done somewhere outside of our lives, outside of our normal everyday lifestyles. So it's not exactly the most healthy way to approach this whole paradigm.
No, not at all. And so to kind of touch on that, a funny little story. So after the World Championships powerlifting, a bunch of people added me on Instagram and wanted to be friends and all that fun stuff. And this one guy sends me a message. We're chatting. He was a spotter loader there. And he's like, what the heck? Where do you work out at? And I was like, well, I am a farmer. and I know that sounds funny, but there's a lot of truth to that. Ever since I was a small child, I've been throwing heavy bales of hay and chopping wood and doing all these things that maybe made me a little more predisposition to be able to move a lot of weight. And I find it hilarious because I have an Oura ring and that thing tracks everything about my life, right? And it's so funny when I go out to do all my chores, because we still live on a small farm. When I go out to feed horses and take care of all the animals outside, my ring asks me if I was working out, because it's like, what the heck's going on here? Yeah. So every night I have to clear it out. I was like, no, that's not a workout. But that's not a workout. That's not a workout. But it's a funny little story because there are different lifestyles that are also a huge part of that.
Yeah. Well, and I totally understand why people say, like, sure, it's easy if you're a farmer, it's easy if you're a sales clerk or something, you're on your feet all the time. My partner is an emergency room nurse. She's on her feet all day. She's got a lot of walking to do. But me, I'm mostly in front of my computer. So I do have to make those kinds of efforts and look for places in my day where I can add those extra movements, or think about those 3 categories that I was talking about, like how I can actually turn some of my work in. You can see I'm at my desk right now, but I'm standing. I have a standing desk, which isn't the be all end all. It's a great way to remind yourself to move more, but it's not. If you don't like standing at your standing workstation, you don't have to get one. Don't start throwing tomatoes at the screen or at the headphones if you're listening. But you do have to put some effort into it for sure to look for those opportunities. But I have the same. I've got an Apple Watch, and it constantly is telling me that I'm done moving for the day at like, I think this morning it was like 9:30 this morning. It said, "You've finished your movement for the day." I'm like, no, I haven't. Come on. Like, that's the wrong message to be sending. But also that just shows how much movement I actually get during the day, even though the majority of my day is spent in front of a computer.
Well, I love all of that. And so let's kind of dive into the cognitive behavioral part of this, because now you've become a connoisseur of that. You're seeing all these people, you have people coming to you, and you can probably identify right off the bat if somebody is maybe in it for different reasons than maybe they should be. And not saying it's a bad reason to be getting into to use something as a tool or a goal. We all have goals. It's great to have goals, but I think sometimes we set up ourselves for failure because maybe we are way overthinking this way to reach our goals. So
yes. Yeah, well, and you used a word when you were just saying that, the word should. There's an awful lot of shoulding ourselves into things, and health and wellness is definitely one of those things of like, either the doctor tells you should get in shape, or you should lose some weight, or a family member or a parent or somebody tells you that you should do this, or you think, well, looking at Instagram and pictures on the internet and TV shows and stuff, like, oh, I should probably lose some weight. So when people come to me and I hear that word should, the first thing I say is, well, okay, so why? And I say, well, because I'd be healthier. I'm like, okay, well, why is that important to you? There's a little thing in cognitive behavior therapy called the 5 whys. So anytime you're looking into, or you're thinking about making a change in your life, or you're making a decision about what kind of activity to engage in next, asking yourself why is always a good thing. But usually your first answer isn't very helpful. It's pretty superficial. So then the second one, a little bit more helpful. And usually by about 5 whys deep, you start to really get into the really meaningful stuff that can identify whether or not this is the right thing for you to be doing to address that actual problem, not the superficial problem. But it also gives you that reason to keep going on the days when it is really hard and you don't feel like doing it, or you're starting to get bored or whatever. When you have that 5th or 6th or 7th why, you can return to that, and that can, well, it does away with motivation. You have to worry about finding motivation because you've got a why, and that's much more powerful. Obviously, it doesn't make it super easy. It doesn't mean that you're never going to struggle and stuff, but it roots you a little bit more genuinely in your actual goal. So yeah, that's definitely one of the things I look at.
Yeah, and I think a lot of it's cultural conditioning, right? Especially now in the realm of social media, we're being conditioned every day without even knowing it because of the things that we are looking at and reading and all of that. And we are culturally conditioned that you should look like X, or you should be healthy, or you shouldn't eat this, or, like there's definitely a conditioning factor there as well that kind of tends to pollute our decisions sometimes.
And a lot of them are at odds with each other too. It's like, you should be eating this. No, you should never be eating that. Wait, what? How can both lead to better health? That's crazy, which ends up just confusing everybody. And a lot of people get stuck in what we call research mode. So we spend so much time, like you said, on social media, getting these messages that we're not even really aware of. Some of them are conflicting, and we get so caught up in trying to decide which one's right and which one's right for us and which one we should go for, that we actually never do any of them, because you're just spending all this time like researching which one's going to be the right direction to go. And a lot of the time, the best way to make that decision is to actually start doing one of them and see how it works and see how it feels and see how it reacts in your body. But yeah, you're right. There's a fantastic book, I'm forgetting the author's name, but it's called Healthy Deviant. And she had one section in the book about how our biology is ancient. Like we're still, like, evolution moves very slowly. Like for an evolutionary trait to actually show up, I think it takes 10,000 years to actually become like a noticeable trait for our genes as a species to actually change. But the technology and everything has progressed at such a rapid rate that we are basically, as she put it, apes in an arcade. And I just love that analogy, because I think of like the arcade of my youth in the 80s, going to the arcades and the flashing lights and the smell of the popcorn and the everything going on around you, and your poor biology is just going, this is crazy, I don't know what to do with this, but it's really fun, I need more, give me more. And that's kind of where we find ourselves on a daily basis now, because we've got the arcade in our pocket or on our screen in front of us at any given time. And you're right, it does seep its way into our brains and plant these seeds where we think we should be doing these certain things, but we're not really sure why. We haven't actually taken the time to think about why we want to do those things or what the outcome is that we're looking for. And that's really where the cognitive behavior therapy comes in for me.
So let's dive into this a little, because the whys can be a very hard thing to answer. I actually want to compare it to journaling, because sometimes it is very hard. I personally am terrible at journaling, and so I actually don't make any of my clients do it, to be quite honest. But I can compare it with that, because the thing is you have a very hard time sometimes being real with yourself about your why. You, even in your head, the things you're thinking about your why are deeply rooted in somebody else's opinion, or like you said, something your doctor said, or it's not actually your why. It's something that you have constructed out of a lot of other things. And so when you start analyzing that and putting it down on paper, sometimes it can be very hard to actually identify what your why is.
Absolutely. And you know what? To be completely honest, it can be pretty painful too. Like it can really shake you to your core sometimes to realize where these thoughts or where these shoulds are really coming from. And that's exactly why we avoid it. That's exactly why we don't want to do that work, and we just keep it at that should level instead of getting into the whys, because it really does, it digs into those secret little thoughts that you don't necessarily always want to think about. And this isn't true for everybody, but a lot of the time it does strike on some level, some sort of old, not trauma in the way, the word trauma has been kind of thrashed around in the last little while, and I guess I'm using trauma in the way that we use it now, rather than the way that I think we were sort of raised thinking of it, that it had to be a real traumatic thing, not just anything. But yeah, it can go back to a past trauma like that. So there's a thing in it, the whole root of cognitive behavior therapy, or the whole root of a lot of therapy or self-actualization, is rooted in becoming aware of the way that we're thinking, or the beliefs that we hold, and then taking those and looking at them to see whether or not they're actually serving us anymore. And a lot of our beliefs, a lot of our upbringings, a lot of the thoughts that we have on a daily basis come from a time in our life when we needed some structure. We needed some protection from the outside world. We were children, adolescents. So we grabbed onto these beliefs from parents, from allo parents, from teachers, from anyone around us who said something that we went, oh, wait, okay, that feels comfortable. I want to hold on to that one. Or, okay, my mom has said this like 20 times to me now, it must be true. And we continue through adulthood, and a lot of people I work with in terms of weight loss, like I'll say, well, okay, maybe we can just like try not to eat everything on your plate. Oh, well, I was raised to finish everything on my plate. I'm like, and how's that working out for you? Like, I don't want to be a jerk, but yes, we all were probably raised to eat everything on our plate, because at a certain point, getting freaking kids to eat anything is like a constant struggle. So of course you're told to eat everything on your plate, because your plate's only this big, and then otherwise you'd eat one pea and then run off and do whatever. But at this point in your life, you're still holding on to that belief that you have to finish everything on your plate, even though you're worried about your having excess weight, you're worried about your financial situation because you're buying too much food that's going to waste, your Costco trips are way too expensive and stuff. So taking a moment to really figure out and become aware of those beliefs and those thoughts and things that we've just sort of carried with us is, and this part isn't as painful. This is actually kind of fun, because you can sort of sit back and go, yeah, wait a second, where did I get that belief from? Like, who the heck told me that? And why am I still thinking it now? At 51 years old, I should be able to figure this out. So awareness is where a lot of this really starts, and journaling to bring it back around to where you started this. Journaling is a fantastic way to do that. Just writing down those beliefs, first of all, as they crop up in your life, and then spending some time to figure out, okay, well, is it working for me? Where did I get it from? Do I still want to believe this? What would another belief be that would be a little more productive, a little more helpful? And then how can I actually put this into practice? So I love journaling. It's a really, really great way. I think putting things down on paper or on screen, even paper, is probably better. They say it's better to actually write things down. For me, my handwriting sucks so bad that I can't even, you too, yeah. Yeah, I can't even read my writing. So, and I can type faster than I can think, but my writing is terrible. So I type everything. But it's yeah, it really is important to get it out of your head and onto a screen or a piece of paper. You can do some of the work in your head, but really getting it out in front of you just sort of gives you a little more honesty and a little more separation, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, so the funny thing is I actually used to journal pretty frequently back in the bodybuilding days, right? And at that time, I was holding no stops on what went on the paper. If it came across, I wasn't going to lie and put something that seemed more glamorous down, right? I think some of us want the novel of our life to be better than what it actually is. So we have a tendency to put a filter on what's going down on the paper. And at that particular time, I was trying to do anything to gather my thoughts together because it was a pretty bad time in my life. And I went back and I read some of the stuff recently, like 3 years later, and I was like, oh, crap. Yeah, we should put that away for a while. It was really bad. It wasn't censored, but looking back at how I had analyzed things and all of that kind of stuff, it was a crazy thing to look at. But it was also helpful to look back on that years later because it helped me change ways that I function now as far as my ways of thinking and no longer having toxic thinking patterns and stuff like that.
Well, what you're describing is this the ability to look back and grow from what you've done in the past in a macrocosm, like in a much bigger time frame. But we can do that on a small time frame as well. There's an awful lot of, like, I think a lot of people can identify with the thought or the saying, like, oh yeah, I'm stressed out all the time. Like, I'm always stressed out. I'm always anxious and stressed out. And one of the great things about journaling or writing things down, just capturing those moments, is you can actually look back and see if you've written down, like, okay, I had an anxiety attack, or I was feeling really stressed out at 11:07 a.m. And you can go back the next day and look and go, oh, okay, well, it's not quite the way I remember it. I thought I was stressed out all day, but I actually only had 2 moments that I was stressed out. And actually, you know what? Those were kind of appropriate moments to be stressed out. It was really more that I was being challenged than I was stressed out. And it can give you that clarity to be able to see what the real picture is, rather than, and probably for you, if you think back on that time, it'll either be a little more rosy than it actually was, or it could be a lot more dark than it actually was in your memory. But being able to look back at those notes from that time can give you some clarity and see how far you've come, because we're really bad as a species at acknowledging the work that we've already done and how far we've already come. Like we always say in our weight loss program, it's called Weighless. Our Weighless members often will say, especially this time of year, I haven't lost any weight in the last few weeks. And like, that's great. Like, what are you talking about? And like, well, like, what would you have been doing previously at this time of year? Like, oh yeah, I would have been gaining. Okay, so not losing, not gaining is a win, right? And like, oh yeah, you're right. And we forget to celebrate those kinds of things. So you looking back at those notes, you can celebrate how far you've come, which can then give you some momentum and give you a little more impetus to continue to work on whatever it happens to be, working on yourself, working on your thought patterns, working on your belief systems, all that kind of stuff. So yeah, there's a lot of power to it. And I know journaling has become one of those things you see on Pinterest, and you can spend a lot of money on all these books and 5-minute meditations and morning gratitude journals and stuff, but you really just need a piece of paper and a little bit of courage, I guess.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually want to reverse a little to something you said there. And this is touching on inner dialogue, right? So you said, I'm so stressed out. We have a tendency, I think, as people in our head to convince ourselves of things too, that may not necessarily be as bad as we are making them, but we repeat these things over and over, such as I am stressed out, or I have trauma. Some of these, I'm hitting on some of the trendy ones right now, but I'm stressed out. I have trauma, I have a traumatic something. I have mental health problems. I have ADHD. A lot of people, we tend to compound this with our inner dialogue. And I think we are literally convincing ourselves that we can't break out of a certain cycle because of that inner dialogue that's telling us, oh, I can't do this because of X, Y, or Z.
Yeah. Yeah. One of the first things that I worked on with when I was in cognitive behavior therapy as a patient was to stop identifying myself as an anxious person. Because if you tell yourself you're an anxious person enough times, you will be an anxious person. And it's not about lying to yourself. It's about actually talking about yourself the way that you really are. And it's like, yes, I have some anxiety, but that's not what defines me. Like I was still a loving partner. I was a creative individual. I was a successful business person. There were a lot of other things that defined my personality much more than my anxiety, but I still would refer to myself as being an anxious person. So I think that's, you definitely hit on something important there. But you also brought up an interesting thing. There was a study done on, I'm trying to get it right. I can't remember where it was done, but basically the people who clean rooms in a hotel chain, they were asked to fill out some questionnaires about how active they are, how much exercise they get, how they feel about their bodies, and how strong and capable and stuff they feel. Then a few of them were given activity trackers, like they were given, I think, Fitbits or something like that. Not to buzz market any particular thing, but we've already done Aura and Apple Watch. Why not do Fitbit as well? They were given some sort of activity tracker, some of them, and other ones they weren't. And then over a period of time, obviously a number of them were aware of how much effort, like what their heart rate was, how many steps they were doing, all of that kind of stuff. Then they did the questionnaire again. And and I forgot at the beginning, they did some regular biomarker kind of stuff, like some basic blood work, some like body mass index, that kind of stuff. So then over the course of, I can't remember how long the study was, but at the end, the ones who were given the activity trackers not only reported that they felt more strong and capable and agile and stuff like that, but they actually lost weight and increased muscle mass, even though they didn't really change anything. They weren't given an exercise program, they weren't given a diet program or anything like that. They were just, their awareness was pointed to the work they're actually doing. And there's this thing called a virtuous cycle. So when you feel good about the things you're doing, you tend to do more good things. You create this virtuous loop. So as they became more aware of how many steps they were doing per day, they wanted to do more. As they became more aware of how heavy a load they could carry up a flight of stairs, whatever it happened to be, they wanted to do a little bit more. They started paying attention a little more to what they were eating, because they're like, oh, I've actually lost a few pounds. Well, maybe I'll skip that. Maybe I'll get a diet soda, or I'll skip the French fries and get a salad instead. So there is this identity that we can start to assume and start to become the person that we want to be, if we don't get stuck in that previous language and we start to actually focus on the good things in our life. So to your point, if we don't take the time to actually realize that we're doing some good things, or being able to break out of that, I've been through trauma, or I'm a really stressed out person, or any of those sort of negative thought patterns, then we miss out on actually being able to reward ourselves for the things that we are doing, and then ride that wave to increase the amount of activity that we're doing, or the healthy choices that we're making for our meals, and start to really use our own innate ability to take care of our bodies, as we have for, how long have we been this version of Homo sapien? Like 200,000 years or something like that. So it was 65 million years of evolution bringing us up to the last 200,000 years. Somehow we've managed to make it this far, but in the last 50, we've totally screwed the pooch.
Yeah, absolutely. So I love all this. And to this point, just to add to it a little, I have a little story, because I have a client that, this is from when I very first started coaching, and he's still with me, right? And it has been a true baby steps metamorphosis. And when I say baby steps, I'm talking baby steps. But initially, when I got into coaching, I wanted too much of my clients. I wasn't meeting people where they were at. I just automatically assumed they were like me, and all they had to do was just shut off this and start doing whatever I say, and they're going to get what they want, right? Which was a terrible approach. And I'm thankful I still have a lot of those clients, and we've all grown together. Okay. But anyway, lesson learned on that. You do definitely have to meet people where they're at. But I've been coaching this gentleman for a very long time. I asked him in the beginning to just do a 30-day challenge and remove fast foods and some of the sweets he was eating. And this gentleman is rather large. He was like 350 maybe when we started together. So a pretty big man. And over that 30 days, he had a mental health crisis. And he said it was because of eliminating food. He thought it was a craving thing, which it may have been. I mean, it could have been. There's a lot of facets to that when you're overweight and you have a food addiction. And they weren't facets at the time that I had been diving into. I was like, just stop doing it, you know?
Yeah,
so
whatever. It's easy.
Yeah. And
it's only 30 days. Just do it.
Exactly. So we stopped focusing necessarily so much on food. He did eventually, over time. He wrote me a big long thing about his mental health and all the things that he experienced during the 30 days, which was great and helpful. It also was a tool to help me learn and grow as a professional. But he wrote this huge thing, and here we are like 45 years later. He's made amazing improvements, but still not quite where he wants to be. And him and his wife had their lab work done recently, and it said a lot of things about their insulin resistance and such. So he was like, I really know I need to remove the sugar, and I can't do it anymore. But I can't just remove it right away, because I don't want to have a mental health crisis like last time. I know I'll have a mental health crisis if I remove sugar. And I said, okay, well, I have to cut you off right there, though. I said, you just told yourself you were going to have a crisis before you ever even did, because you're scared of what happened last time. I said, so changing your way of thinking about that's going to be an important part of this journey.
Yeah, it could be argued that it's the most important part of that journey, is redefining and being able to look forward rather than looking back. We do tend to justify an awful lot of our behavior based on our previous experience. And sure, that there is some protective mechanisms in that. Like, it's evolutionarily speaking, I'm sure that kept most of us alive, but we do tend to limit our abilities and what we think we can do based on previous experience, where we really should be expanding what we're able to do, because we should be learning from those stumbling blocks. And I hesitate to even call them failures, because that makes it sound like it's final. A failure isn't the final step. It's that learning step that we all need to have. We all need to have frustrations in order to learn from them. We all need to have stumbles in order to learn from them. We all need to go on the wrong path in order to learn that that's the wrong path and go the other way the next time. So when he's coming at it this next time, if he does decide to try and limit his sugar, I wouldn't say giving up sugar isn't necessarily necessary, but starting to limit the sugar, to remember what happened last time, be aware of those warning signs, but also know what to do when those warning signs come up, and have a plan in place. We tend to forget to use those failures to then concoct a plan A, a plan B, and a plan C for the next time those come up. We just don't even want to think about it. And we just, I never want that to happen again. So I'm never going to put myself in that position. Well, you're going to be in that position again. So how about you learn from that situation and put some plans in place so you are ready for them. But when you were talking about meeting people where they are, I wrote for Scientific American for a number of years. I was the Get Fit guy. I wrote a fitness column for Scientific American. So I was poring over scientific studies constantly and just getting into the nitty gritty. And every time there was like a clear, definitive result from one of the studies, which actually doesn't happen very often when you have these like really good results that actually align with 3 other studies, and you're like, okay, we've got a clear thing. I just need to tell everybody about this result, and we can all be happy and we can all be healthy. And that's that same flaw that I think you were having of not meeting people where they are and giving them the stepping stones to get there, instead of just presenting them with, okay, well, here's the workout, go and do it. What's the problem? Just cut out sugar. I was kind of feeling the same way about presenting these scientific studies. It's like, look, we've got evidence now, everybody go do it. And that doesn't work. Nobody takes that scientific study and then magically turns around their motivation and their stick-to-itiveness just because they saw this scientific study. We do need to meet people where they are, and we do need to take baby steps, are the best kind of steps. Like I applaud anyone who has the ability and the wisdom, really, to go slowly, to take those small steps and be willing to take the time to make sure what you're doing is going to be sustainable, is going to be healthy, is going to be happy, is not going to impact your life in a negative way, and that you're not going to abandon at the first sign of trouble. So baby steps, awesome. I'm totally on board with baby steps.
I like that, Brock. And so what I want to kind of jump into right now is, how can individuals start into getting into some goals of theirs, whether they be health or financial or whatever it may be? Obviously, we decided that there has to be a pertinent why, but what's like the first step to making sure that we're able to succeed with these goals and we haven't bitten off more than we can chew, or that we're not doing it for the wrong reason?
Wow. I wish there was a super simple answer to that, but I think one of the really important things is to, and it's interesting, we actually, I do a podcast with a nutritionist named Monica Reinagel. We have a podcast called The Change Academy. And we actually just recorded a podcast that was all about how people look at, let's say they're starting a diet or they're starting an exercise program or something. And we all want to see, okay, well, what's the success rate? Like, how many people have been through this program, and how many of them lost weight, or how many of them qualified for the Boston Marathon, or how many of them won the national deadlift championship? No, it wasn't deadlift. It was
bench press
national championships. And of course, you want to have some sort of reassurance that whatever you're starting on does have some efficacy. Like, people have experienced some success. You don't want to do something that's completely unproven and untested and stuff. But we tend to look in the wrong places for that evidence of whether we're going to be successful, instead of looking at the extrinsic reasons or evidence. We should be more looking inside ourselves, looking at the intrinsic reasons why this might actually align with our lifestyle or with our goals or with our whys, and whether or not this is something, whether we think, first of all, that we are worthy of succeeding at this, that we're not holding ourselves back. There's an awful lot of, I hate to call it self-sabotage. I keep saying that. There's a whole lot of like sort of shorthand that we use these days, and self-sabotage is one of those ones that makes me cringe a little bit. It looks like it, does that bug you too?
Yeah. Well, I think there's other words for it too, but that's the best way to explain it. That happens to be trendy as well right now.
Yeah. So there is some self-sabotage that tends to happen because we actually don't believe in ourselves that we can achieve and that we're worthy of achieving these goals. So when we're taking on a new activity or we're looking for a new goal, really getting to the root of whether or not this is something you think that you can actually achieve and that you're worthy of achieving, because that's really going to dictate whether you're going to have success, much more so than anything else. And then, of course, looking at it, whether or not it's something that's going to fit within your lifestyle, because we've all seen like the advice to go through your cupboards and throw everything away that doesn't adhere to this list of foods. And yeah, that feels great and it's really exciting, and we can experience some success for a little while, but slowly all those things start sneaking back into the cupboard one by one, and that doesn't necessarily we end up just rebounding, or we end up going back to the previous lifestyle. Like the 30-day challenges, the biggest problem I have with these 30-day challenges is all we're doing is counting down the days until we can go back to the status quo. So, I mean, it's a good stunt to not drink for 30 days or to not have sugar for 30 days or whatever. But if the goal is to just get through those 30 days so you can get back to the status quo, well, that's not really getting you anywhere. You can do it if it's fun. Don't think that you're making a big change in your lifestyle, though. So to go back to the success, looking at whether or not you're going to be successful, of course, having that why, realizing why you're really doing this or why this is important to you, not why should this be important to you, but why it is. And then looking at the actual evidence that you can succeed at this, or that you want to succeed at this, that you believe you can succeed at this, and that it actually makes sense in your life to do it this way, can really go a long way. And then, of course, being open to the fact that you might fail, and that's okay. And all you need to do is pivot. Like, life isn't about being on or off the bandwagon. We always say like, oh yeah, I was doing really well and I fell off the bandwagon. It's like, well, okay, but was there like, it's like Neo in the Matrix when they give him the spoon and the spoon starts bending, and you know, the secret is there is no spoon. It's like, I always use that. It's like, there is no bandwagon. Life is a series of choices. You can make choices that align with your goals. You can make choices that don't. And the only thing you need to do to, quote unquote, get back on the bandwagon is to make your next choice one that aligns with your greater goals. And then you're back on. That's all it takes. And then make the next one, and then make the next one. And if you don't make one that aligns, that's okay. Next time you have a choice to make it the one that aligns with it. And the important part is that most of the choices you're making align with your goal. Not that all of them, because we're not made up of our best days or our worst days. We're made up with all the days in between. Same thing with our choices. When it's not the day that we only ate salad or the day that we only ate cheeseburgers, it's all the days in between the salad and the cheeseburgers that actually adds up. So those choices, just making sure that you're making choices more often than not that align with your goals, and you don't have to worry about being on or off a bandwagon.
Well, and I want to touch on one more quick thing here while we're visiting this area of things, and that we'll use the trendy word self-sabotage. I feel, and I would love to get your opinion on this, but I feel that many times the reason that we do convince ourselves we're not worthy, or we get that negative self-talk, or we tend to throw in the towel on things, any number of those things in that lane, I feel that a lot of times that's because we kind of go back to what we feel is safe and easy. And so there is this element of sometimes getting outside of your normal comfort zone and that place that you've been comfortable for so long kind of triggers this safety, go back to homeostasis avenue. So I think that there's a part of us that, no matter how elite or great we are, you, me, we've probably all had this moment where we start to talk ourselves out of things because it's no longer that safe place. We're having to push ourselves a little outside of our comfort zone.
Yeah. There's a great quote that I'm struggling to, I'm going to bastardize it terribly, but it basically is, we need to become comfortable with discomfort in order to achieve long-term success. Like momentary discomfort is what we have to be comfortable with momentary discomfort in order to achieve long-term success. Shoot, I wish I had the quote in front of me, but that's the basis of it. And a lot of that is so true, that like those moments where we have the craving for the cookie, or we feel the pull of the beer in the fridge, or whatever it happens to be, those are really, they're momentary discomforts. Those kind of cravings generally like come and go quite quickly. We give them a lot of power as soon as they show up because we don't want to have them, and we don't realize that we're always going to have them. Everybody has them. It's just whether or not you give the power over to them, or if you keep the power for yourself. Because I mean, I have crazy thoughts sometimes about jumping off bridges, but I don't give it any power. I'm like, what if I just jumped off this bridge right now? Where would I land? I'm not going to do it. I don't give it any power. It's just one of those thoughts. But when I have the thought of, oh, I should have another cookie, or I'll skip my workout, because we don't want to have those thoughts, or we think we can eliminate those thoughts, we go to war with them, and that gives them power. So self-sabotage, I think, sometimes just comes down to exactly what you're saying, that we're not comfortable with being uncomfortable, that momentary discomfort, long enough to get past it, or to dismiss that thought, or forget about it, or move on to something else. And I think the other thing about self-sabotage is, again, going back to that failure, we haven't learned how to fail elegantly. Like we haven't learned to go like, okay, well, that wasn't the right way to go. I'm going to try something next now, because that wasn't right. Instead, we beat ourselves up and we swing the pendulum completely back to the other direction and overcorrect, and to the point where we're heading for the rhubarb. I don't know if that's is that an expression that Americans use?
Yeah, we don't, but I can.
You probably know what
I do know what you're talking about. Yes. Yeah, so I actually can relate with this on a lot of levels, though, because I think I talked to you a couple weeks before the World Championships, and I was having a major shoulder problem. And that began to really mess with my thoughts, because all of a sudden in my head, it was like, oh, I might go here and fail. And I just did all this work and now I'm going to fail. And we get so afraid of failure that it almost chokes us out. It's that same scenario that we were just talking about. And I had to really reverse my thinking on that, because I got down this crazy rabbit hole about, oh, what if I go? What if I don't win? What if this happens? Like, I started brewing all these scenarios in my head, and I had to turn it around and be like, if I don't go, or if I go and things do not work out, it's okay. I can just go back and I can work, and it will happen again sometime. It's not negative. We're going to learn from it, and we're going to come back and grow. I had to turn that it wasn't a failure. We were going to use this as a tool for next time if for some reason that scenario came around. So there was a huge difference in thinking in those approaches.
Yeah, well, can you imagine how boring the Olympics would be if the only people who went to it were the ones who were guaranteed to win?
Exactly.
Like there'd be like 2 countries and 10 athletes. It would be the most boring thing in the world. There'd be nobody, and no one would surprise us. Nothing would be gained or lost. It would just be like, yep, there's Usain Bolt again. Right on. There's Michael Phelps again. All right.
That's the funny part of it, though. We have a tendency to create these scenarios like, oh, everyone else I'm competing against is going to be healthy and they're going to be fine and they're not going to have an issue. And they maybe had better training cycle because they weren't injured or whatever. We start making excuses and justifications for everything when you don't know what is going on. You really don't. You have to go there, worry about you, do the best you possibly can, and then learn and grow from it if it doesn't work out.
Yeah, well, and we tend to overemphasize how much other people actually think of us. Like, everybody else is thinking about themselves. They're not thinking about me. And
Yeah.
you really have to realize that sometimes. And there's a great example was one of the first marathons that I ran. I did it in Montreal, and I came back to Edmonton, showed up at work on Monday morning, and somebody was like, "Oh, hey, did you do that race on the weekend?" I said, "Oh, yeah, I did." And I said, "Oh, did you win?" And I just started laughing. I'm like, yeah, I mean, that's how much people think about other people's stuff, how much people know about marathoning or bench pressing or anything that we're desperately interested in, but they don't know. Like, he actually thought I might have won, which is an absolutely ridiculous thought. As like a 40 whatever year old I was at that point, I wasn't going to show up and win the marathon. That wasn't even on the radar. But we get ourselves really convinced that this is the most important thing, and then we're going to let everybody down, and people aren't going to think the same of us if we don't win or don't do what we set out to do. But these are stories that can sometimes we feel like they're motivating, and that they're the thing that's making us work a little bit harder, and maybe there's some truth to that. But at a certain extent, we have to realize that most people just don't care, and the experience of going and doing it and failing is just as valuable, if not more valuable in some ways, than just showing up and kicking everybody's ass. Like, I've gone to races where I actually have won and been like, oh, well, that wasn't as satisfying as I thought, because, well, everybody else is like 60 and I'm sure I kicked their asses, but it's not very gratifying. So having somebody to compete against, and even if you don't win, you were there, you did your best, and hopefully you didn't hurt your shoulder more. That was the only thing I was worried about was that it's like, just don't hurt it further.
Yeah, not at Worlds I didn't, but this last weekend actually I did a meet. It was the last meet of the year, and I failed on an attempt and squished myself pretty good. So my shoulder's now toast. She's rest in pieces. But yeah, but it's, it was a ticking time bomb, so it was going to happen eventually, and that's kind of where that sits, unfortunately. But yeah, so anyway, you
sorry
were
to
going,
bring up a painful situation.
Totally, literally.
Yes.
No, it's fine though, because I posted, it was funny, I posted the video of me failing.
Yeah, I saw it on Instagram. Yeah.
And somebody sent me a DM and they were like, why would you want people to see that you failed? It looked like you won, but you didn't hit your attempt. And I said, because everybody fails, especially when you're pushing the limits. Like, there is going to be, the harder you push, the closer you're going to come to failure, because you are skating that fine line, right? And it was the last meet of the year, and I was like, you know what? I'm going to try something I haven't tried. I don't want to play it safe now. I've played it safe for everything else. And it was a setup issue. It wasn't even really the weight issue. It was just I didn't get set up the way I needed to be, and so it cost me. And I actually, the minute they handed off the weight to me, I could feel I wasn't quite how I needed to be. But I'm kind of a perfectionist, so in that matter of seconds, there was a huge talk I had with myself about things not always being perfect and just go for it anyways. And then when it wasn't right at the bottom, it was really bad at the bottom. I did something that we call folding. So it's where you can't keep that weight stable anymore, and you drop it kind of down to your chest, and you get a little out.
It looked like it hit your chest quite hard. That was the thing I was worried about. But then
you
got up, so you're okay.
Yeah. But I felt it fold at the bottom. And I in that moment, I was like, oh, my coach is going to give me so much shit about this. That's like all I'm thinking. Right. And I was like, well, I'm going for it anyway. And when I tried to press, that was a mistake, because I was so out of my groove, we call it, that I knew I was going to eat that barbell, and it came back so fast. There wasn't even a second to even think about that part. Next thing you know, it was touching my neck. I was like, holy cow. I said that was a guillotine press. That's what I told everybody. But yeah, I mean, if you're skating the line, it's going to be a little bit easier to fail. And that was a risk I was willing to take. So, and that's sometimes what makes the difference between people that win and lose. I mean, so, but it's a risk.
Yeah. Well, our mutual friend Brad Kearns says that he DNF'd, like did not finish as many races as he podiumed. And I think that's exactly the same sort of mindset. It's like he was putting himself out there, and sometimes he didn't even finish the race, but other times he was on the podium. He won the race or was first, second, or third. And yeah, when you're putting yourself out there, and you know, I putting that on social media, can you imagine if more people were really honest, not performatively honest? Like we see there, I think it's subsided a little bit, but for a few years there, a couple of years back, there were an awful lot of like no filter, and like, here I am, I'm crying because I'm having a bad day. And it was so performative. It wasn't real. It wasn't an actual failure. It was just like, it was as fake as the snapshots from your life that don't actually exist. But like just putting that video up of you being like, yep, here's me going for it. I didn't do it, but this is what happened. And for people who know me, they're going to be interested, and people who are in the same boat as me are going to appreciate the honesty, or appreciate the fact that, wasn't it like 204 pounds or something you were lifting?
It was 210.
So like that's amazing. Like it doesn't matter if you just the fact that you got there, to me, is mind-blowing.
You know, the only thing I can think of is I should have put like 300 on the bar and failed at that, because I would have felt a little cooler.
No, that 210 is cool enough. Believe me, you don't need to get carried away. That would have been performative.
I know,
no,
I'm playing.
Yeah, but going back, like, there's got to be a way. Like at some point, we've got to figure this social media thing out where we actually can be honest with ourselves and with each other, and not turn it into a popularity contest. But so I think it was wonderful, and I didn't even think for a second, why would you put that up there? I was like, she came so close.
Yeah. Well, so funny you bring up the filter thing though, because that's a thing that's huge right now, right? All these fake, you know, you can't even look
AI
at some of these
things.
now that's happening. But I find myself, it's in all of us. We want to be our best and we want to present our best, right? Of course. But I catch myself all the time. Like I had horrible acne last week, and I caught myself going to make an Instagram story, or I didn't have makeup on or something. I was like, oh golly, that looks so bad. But I wanted to say something I was passionate about. And I have made a pact with myself. I'm not going to use filters and cover that stuff up. And so I posted it anyway, which was a little uncomfortable. But on the flip side, hopefully there's a genuine, you know, that people understand we get things, blemishes, we get things we deal with on a day-to-day basis. And it has nothing to do with how reputable we are or anything like that. So
yeah, we're humans. And you know what, even non-humans on this planet get like mangy looking fur and weird looking scales. And I had to take a beautiful alder tree out of my front yard because it was getting all rotten. Like entropy gets us all. It's okay. That's what happens.
Well, Brock, if there was anything you wanted to get out to the listeners today on the show, what would it be?
Whoa, gosh. Well, you know what? I have a quiz that people might find really interesting, because when we're looking at goal setting or behavior change or lifestyle change or achieving big goals, sometimes it's really important to know what your personality set is, like what we call it a goal setting personality. And we actually set up a quiz on our Change Academy website that sort of helps you along, and then curates some information and some podcast episodes and stuff. So if people are interested in really like sort of beginning a behavior change sort of adventure, or stepping up their behavior change adventure, they can go to changeacademypodcast.com/personality. So changeacademypodcast.com/personality. And there's a little quiz there, and it doesn't take very long. It's just a quick little quiz, but it can give you some real insight into even just answering the questions. Sometimes it's kind of like journaling. Like as you're answering the questions, you sort of, if you're honest with yourself, and I encourage everybody, be honest with yourself when you're answering the questions. We don't see it. We're not going to grade you. Nobody's going to judge you. So be really honest with yourself. And even just answering the questions can clarify a lot of things for you. And then if you do finish it and submit it, you'll get some helpful little hints from us and some podcast episodes to listen to if you're interested. And yeah, I think that'd be a nice little I don't know when this episode's coming out, but if it's before Christmas, then that's my Christmas gift to everyone, or my Hanukkah gift, or my whatever it is, candlelights gift.
I love it. Well, if people want to find you, how do they go about doing that?
Well, brockarmstrong.com is my website, but yeah, Change Academy podcast is a great place to go to. That's sort of my real passionate outlet right now. I still do some fitness training, but I tend to talk people out of it more than I talk people into it these days.
Me too. Who would have thought it?
Yeah, it's like, you don't need to run a marathon. Let's look at some behavior change instead.
I love it. That's great. Well, I'll put all your information into the show notes, and I really appreciate you joining me today.
No, thank you so much for this. Was a really fun conversation. Sometimes it feels like a snow cone machine where you're putting the ice cubes in the top and turning the crank, trying to get stuff out, but I could talk to you for hours.
I love it. That's my favorite part. People always come to me when they want to do podcasts or vice versa, and they're like, do you have a script for me? And I'm like, no, we just shoot from the hip around here, and what comes out, that's what happens. And it's genuinely organic and wholesome, and that's what I love.
I hope I kept it wholesome.
Thank you so much, Brock.
All right. Thank you.